What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my Lightroom tutorial series. This is video number 2, and in today's video we are going to be talking about importing your photos into Lightroom. And we're going to cover a few different subjects in this video, including how to import your photos, how to select the source that you need to import your photos, and a few other details such as creating proxies, smart previews, and changing your metadata. So let's just get right into it here. First off, we need to obviously import our photos into Lightroom. So we are starting out here. This is my LR 2020 catalog. This is the catalog that we started in my last video. And down here in the lower left-hand corner, you will see two buttons. You'll see Import and Export. So I think those are pretty self-explanatory. We're going to click on Import. And as you can see, it pops up this new window. And this is the window where you will begin importing your photos. Now, there are a few different options you have when you start importing your photos, and we're going to just talk about those really quickly. The first one, obviously, that we have highlighted here is copy. This simply, when you select the photos that you want to import, it will copy those photos in the format that they are from one location and copy them into a new location and add them to the catalog. And we'll talk about what location that gets moved to in just a minute, but let's just move on down the line here. And speaking of which, there is the move selection. This very simply just moves your photos to a new location and adds it to the catalog. Now, it's not the same as copying, obviously, where copy will actually copy the photos and place them in a new location. This will simply move your photos from the location where you have them stored to another location when it adds them to the catalog. I don't use this function. I don't know of anybody who actually uses this function. Maybe if you were into doing more storage saving or file arranging, you may use this function here, but I never touch it. And then we have add, and this is pretty self-explanatory as well. This simply adds your photos to the catalog without moving them from their source destination. So again, I don't really know anybody who uses this unless you have like a master. The only scenario that I can think of is if you have a master folder where you're keeping all your raw photos and you just want to add them to the catalog and you don't want them to get moved. That's that scenario that I can think about. And then our fourth option here, which is really the first option on the screen, but it's usually not the first one to get highlighted, is copy as DNG. Now, this kind of harkens back to the days when computer storage wasn't as efficient as it is today, and you didn't have as much storage available as you do today. Where copy DNG comes into play is when you shoot your photos in RAW, and I suspect most everybody who is interested in using Lightroom, they do have started shooting their photos in RAW. DNG literally stands for digital negative. So, in the old film days, you had the negatives that you shot on, then you had them processed in the darkroom. Well, it's the same concept here. Copy as DNG will copy your raw photos from whatever folder you have them in, move them to the new location, import them, and in the import process, it will convert them from a raw file type, whatever your raw file type is, it varies depending on camera manufacturer, into a DNG. And there are a few benefits to this. First off, DNGs are much smaller file types than raw photos. Some raw photos, depending on how big your megapixel sensor is in your camera, they can be quite hefty file sizes, and DNGs will make them into smaller file sizes without any negative impacts to your photos. So that's one option there. Another option is that DNG is a universally accepted file type. It can be used in almost any photo editing software that is out there. I used copy as DNG quite often when I first started photography because, again, I was concerned about file size, and I like the idea of having a universal file type. But since I do most of my editing in Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop, I really don't worry about that too much. The only scenario where I could see this really coming into play is if I had a camera where Adobe hadn't added the file types to to their software. So, for example, say Canon came out with a 5D Mark V, which is not going to happen because they've moved into the mirrorless world. Obviously, those file types wouldn't be readable by Adobe software, but creating them as a DNG, it would make the files acceptable and the software could read them. Adobe does also have a standalone DNG converter, and again, where that would come in handy is if you wanted to use files from like a new camera, for example, or a file type that isn't accepted by Lightroom, and you convert them to GNG, and then the system could import it. So that's the benefits to that. I simply use the copy setting because, again, my machine can handle processing pretty well, and I've got a few storage settings set up, so I'm not so worried about storage right now. So I simply use copy. So let's go in and look for some photos here. So you'll see over here on the left-hand side, you have your source dropdown. This is the source from which you will select your photos to import. It'll show all of the drives that are on your computer. I have 4 different ones: my local drive, my main storage drive, my 8 terabyte external hard drive, and then a 1 terabyte external hard drive. And if you guys are nerds like me, you'll laugh that I have my 1 terabyte named Jarvis. And then for any Tron fans out there, my 8 terabyte is titled MCP. I like to think I'm clever. Anyway, let's find some photos to import. So let's select a folder to import photos from. At the time of recording this, I actually managed to snap a couple pictures, more than a couple pictures, as you can see, of a little house finch that was perched out on a tree near my apartment. So I am obviously not going to select all 253 photos. That would be a pain in the butt. Let's just talk really quickly about selecting photos that you want. Over here, you will see at where it says all photos, it's checkmarked. That means all of the photos that I want to select are checkmarked. Obviously, I'm not going to import 253 photos, so if you want to just select a couple photos at a time, you can uncheck that, and then you can just go through and manually select whatever photos you want to import. So say I wanted to import these 4 photos here. These are the ones that I would select, and then they would be imported. Now, if I did want to do all 253 photos, I would just have everything selected. For the purposes of this video, we're not going to do that. We're just going to select a photo to import. Something I want to show you guys really quickly. Down here in the lower left-hand area, you've got 2 buttons next to the check all and uncheck all down here. This one that I have highlighted here, this is the grid view. This is where you can see all of your different photos that you have selected from your source. And then you have the single view, which allows you to view one photo at a time. As you can see, we have this nice red male house finch here. And this is a good way if you want to just really quickly look at a single photo, maybe punch in, check if you are in focus or not, and zoom in, zoom out, and then you can toggle back to the grid view and then just keep doing whatever you're doing. So really quickly, 2 very useful buttons right there. You also have the sort down here kind of in the center right. This would allow you to sort your photos however you wish by, time captured, checked state, file name, file type, media type. I usually don't worry about this. And then over here, obviously, you can increase or decrease the size of your thumbnails. So let's get into the file handling. This is where you would set up all of your settings for the photos that you are going to import into your catalog. And you have 4 different windows here. I'm just going to collapse them all to show you them really quickly. You have file handling, file name, apply during import, and destination. Now we'll go through each of these one by one here, starting with file handling. This is a pretty important section right here. This has a few different applications that you may find useful. The first one up here is build previews. Now, a preview is what you actually see when you are working in the develop module and doing your edits and everything like that. What build previews does is it tells Lightroom what kind of preview you want to have. And as you can see here, there are 4 different options. There's minimal, embedded, and sidecar, standard, and 1-to-1. Minimal, it tells Lightroom to simply build the minimal preview that it can. This is advantageous when you want to keep the file sizes smaller. The disadvantage here is, say you wanted to, in a develop module, punch in and check, see what your edits are doing, or if there's some sharpness issues. It will take Lightroom a while to build another preview in the develop module and depixelate and show you a complete image. So depending on how quickly you need to get edits done, this might be advantageous to you as well, but I don't use it because I have a little bit more time than most folks to edit my photos. Then you have embedded and sidecar. What this means is that during the import process, Lightroom will build embedded previews, but during the time that it doesn't have those, it can jump to the sidecar JPEG, which is the JPEG preview that comes with the file that you import, and it will use that as a reference when you need to punch in and check anything on the photo. Again, it's a slower process, and I'm not sure I know anybody who uses this. I'm sure there are folks out there that do, but I don't use it. Standard is just as it sounds. Standard preview building, again, it's a slightly larger file type than minimal, but it's just the standard amount that Lightroom will put in to build a preview for you. And again, if you were to punch in to the photo in the develop module and want to check certain aspects of the photo, it would probably still take Lightroom a little bit of time to create that new preview, depixelate, and show you what you want to see. So from what I always recommend to folks, and again, this is just my workflow, is to use the 1-to-1. Now, what does that mean? A 1-to-1 preview means that Lightroom will, once it's done importing the photos, it will do an extra step and take the time to create a full preview for your photos. So when you decide to zoom in and scrub through the photo and check different areas for any issues, it's a pretty seamless process because the preview is already built. And I find that very helpful. It does take some time. It's more file size, but I find it very advantageous. So take that however way you would take that however you will. I'm not telling you guys how to edit your photos or how to do your imports. I'm just showing you what it is. Now up here we have Build Smart Previews. And what Build Smart Previews does is when you import your photos, if you have Build Smart Previews checkmark, it will build a secondary, basically it will build a secondary preview of your image in Lightroom. This will come in handy if, say, you have your photos stored on an external hard drive like I do, and for whatever reason you need to disconnect your external hard drive, but you want to go back in and edit your photos. Well, if your external hard drive is disconnected, Lightroom won't be able to see your source material for your photos, and then it'll just cause you all kinds of problems. However, if you have told it in the import process to build a smart preview, in that case, Lightroom will hold on to those smart previews inside of its own universe, whatever you want to call it there, and you will be able to edit those photos with those smart previews. Now, the quality won't be as good, you know, it won't have the same look as you would when you are editing on the actual files themselves, but the advantage is once you reconnect your external hard drive, Lightroom will see that connection and it will apply all of those edits that you did to the smart previews to the actual files themselves, and then everything looks much better. I don't really worry about doing this because I keep most of my photos on my 8 terabyte external hard drive, and I don't really ever disconnect that thing, so I don't really worry about building smart previews. One very useful feature that I keep checkmarked the entire time is don't import suspected duplicates. For example, if you had to go back into a file source to import some more photos, let's say, for example, you go back into your import source to import photos and you have every photo checkmarked. If you don't have don't import suspected duplicates checkmarked, you could run into the issue of doing a re-import of photos you've already imported, and that will cause just issues that you don't want to have. So I find it very useful to have this selection checked. That way I can avoid re-importing any photos that I already have in my catalog. Make a second copy too. Now this just tells Lightroom where to put a second copy of your photos when you do the import. This can be a specific location on your external hard drive or your storage drive. I, for example, have it going to my storage drive in a downloads backup folder. and just a good way to have a secondary copy of all of your photos. Add to collection. This is where you can add your photos to a specific collection if you have a collection of photos that you want to have in Lightroom. And it's useful if you're doing that kind of file storage segmentation, if you will. I really don't worry about this much, but still a useful function to have. Alright, so the next drop down here is file renaming. Now this is where you would rename your files to whatever you want it to be. There are a few different options. You can do a full custom rename, a custom name with the original file number. There are just tons of different options here, really too many to get into. I have shoot name plus original file number checkmarked. So what that means is that I will rename these photos to whatever I want them to be. We'll just call this Redbird. That's not how you spell bird. Redbird, because it's a red house finch. And then I leave the file extension as is, which means shoot name, and then it keeps the file extension. So the photo number plus the raw file type. For Canon, because I shoot on Canon, it's a CR2 file type. So really quickly, that's just a nice way to organize your photos with whatever file name you want them to have. Now down here with apply during import, this is where you can really quickly add any quick develop settings that you want, your metadata, whatever metadata changes you want to have, and keywords. Keywords are certain things that you can use in Lightroom to search for certain photos. So for example, I want to say red because this bird is red, or finch because it's a finch. I will add those keywords, and once I import the photos, it will add those keywords to the metadata, and I can easily search for these photos that way. I know a lot of people probably won't touch metadata because it can get kind of overwhelming, but I'll just give you guys a quick rundown. Metadata is what the embedded source info will be in your photos once you export it. Your files already have metadata in them, specifically the type of camera that the photo was taken with, what kind of lens was used, your shutter speed, aperture, all of those different things. I have a custom metadata setting which includes my copyright info, my contact information, and basically it's just a bit of insurance. That way, say somebody tries to rip my photo off of a website or my website and try to claim it as their own, I can say, hey, not so fast, and I can show my metadata. If you're sharing your photos out on Facebook or Instagram, this really doesn't matter all that much because Facebook and Instagram will strip the metadata from your photos when they put it through their compression. So I still include this because, again, if I am uploading a photo to my website and somebody tries to steal it from me, I can say, hey, this is my photo and here's my metadata to prove it. There are a lot of videos out there that talk about using metadata in your Lightroom import, and I may do another video on this, but just for the purposes of this import video, I'm not going to go over that right now. I may talk about it here at a later date. And then finally, we have destination. Now, this is where your photos go during the import process. And again, this will all just depend on how you have your file storage set up. What my process is, I basically tell Lightroom, hey, I want you to keep the imported files in the same folder. However, I'm going to tell you to store them in a copy folder. This is kind of a neat feature that Lightroom has where it will, if you have this into subfolder feature checkmarked, it will automatically put your imports into a copy folder. Now, again, you don't have to call it copy. You can call it whatever you want, import, or Lightroom, or just whatever you want to have it called. Again, handy little feature here. So for my photos, they would import into my April 1st, 2020 folder, and Lightroom would direct it to go into my copy folder. So that's just a quick rundown of your destination settings for Lightroom import. So let's just import this one photo here. Then as you can see, it is going through the process up here where it is importing the photos and then it is building those one-to-one previews. So as you guys can see, it has imported our one photo here. If I jump over to the develop module really quickly and then punch in here, you can see a very seamless transition. This is the benefit of importing with that one-to-one preview. So there you go, guys. That is the import process to get your photos into Adobe Lightroom Classic. I hope you guys found this video informational and helpful. If you did, hit that like button. If you're not already, please subscribe. If you did find this video helpful, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, make sure you're subscribed, and make sure you have that notification bell set for when I upload future videos. And until then, guys, stay tuned for more Lightroom tutorial videos.